everyone. Welcome back into the podcast. I am really excited to do this guest because the Bears offensive line has had some fans upset. It's struggled here the first couple games of the season, especially against the Texans on week 2. So if you're going to analyze the offensive line, you have to get, and I mean it when I say this is not hyperbole, the best offensive line analyst available in the country, and that is Brandon Thorn. His content is incredible. He is at Brandon Thorn NFL on Twitter/X. Make sure you follow him there. You can subscribe to the Trench Warfare newsletter. Incredible offensive line content. He's even got some content going on with Andrew Whitworth, breaking down video film as well. You can catch that as well. A lot of great content. He's doing it on a regular basis, and he joins me now. Brandon, Bill Zimmerman, how you doing?
Doing great, man. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you because I'd love to get your insight as to what's going on here. So before we get into what you've maybe seen on film these first couple of games from these Bears games, I want to take you kind of leading into this season and kind of get your thought on how Ryan Poles built this line and what you expected this line to be heading into the season. Because, you know, Ryan Pace, I think a lot of Bears fans didn't really like his approach to the offensive line. There was never a really heavy commitment, couple second-round picks, never a first-round pick, never a massive free agent signing. He kind of, took a different approach to it than I think Bears fans were hoping. Ryan Poles comes in, sits down, says, I'm an offensive lineman. We are building this thing in the trenches. And I think Bears fans were hoping to see more of a commitment there. Obviously, the top 10 pick with Darnell Wright, the Nate Davis signing, that's not a massive signing. I think that's more of a mid-level signing. And, kept Tevin Jenkins as kind of nitpicked at center. So what have you thought of Ryan Poles' approach? I'm sure an offensive line guy like you wants to see, 5 first-round picks going across the front. But what did you think of how Poles has approached the offensive line thus far?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's, in terms of the investment level, it's been fair. I mean, it hasn't been, negligent or anything like that, I would say, especially considering they do have the first round pick, in the couple years that he's been there. He spent that on Darnell Wright, like you mentioned. Signed, a guy like Nate Davis, although, can't really seem to stay healthy and things like that. That hasn't necessarily worked out. I would have liked, I think my biggest nitpick, just to stay on that one topic, would be to, how they have failed to address the center position in, I think, an adequate enough way. That to me is kind of the biggest one, to be honest. I would have loved to seen them, draft one of these centers, which I thought this was one of the best center classes it's the best center class that I've seen in scouting the draft, every offensive lineman in the draft over the last 4 years for Bleacher Report, this being my 5th year with them. This was the best center class that I've saw. So I thought that there was certainly a player that they could have added there that would have been an upgrade over what they have now. So that would be kind of my big one, I would say, or even they could have signed somebody else. So I think center, but yeah, overall it's not like, that bad of a situation, I don't think, all things considered. And then coming into the year for Establish the Run, where I rank all 32 offensive lines, I believe I had them 24 or so, somewhere like that. So below average. And I haven't really seen too much yet. I mean, through 2 weeks, that is causing too many alarm bells to go off for me necessarily. I mean, there's a lot of recency bias right now, and you just have to factor in that they just won against the Texans. This is, I think, one of the 10 or so best defensive lines in the league, especially rushing the passer. And Darnell Wright didn't look good against Danielle Hunter, who's a cyborg. I mean, that's, it is what it is. I mean, Danielle Hunter is going to do that to players better than Darnell Wright. Maybe to not to that degree, like he did him the other night or the other day. That was, it was a rough game. But, I just think people need to take a step back. And I think it's going to be something they're going to be able to do when you look at their schedule as well. This is a soft schedule in terms of a defensive line, especially the next 3 weeks. Assuming the Colts have some injuries, which I think they do. Their run defense is terrible right now. The Rams have some young guys. The Panthers might be the worst team in the league. Those are their next 3 games. I mean, I think in 3 weeks, we could be feeling a little bit better about this. And I would be more surprised if in 3 weeks you have me on or, things, happen after these next 3 weeks and it's not a little bit better or quite a bit better than it is now. That would surprise me more than what has happened already.
Okay, and that's why we wanted to have you on and hope to decrease some of the panic around Bears Nation right now, because obviously a lot of guys are concerned based on what they've seen on the film in the first two games. And, I think a lot of times fans want to circle one thing, and Nate Davis has been very unpopular with the
Yep.
fan base because of his lack of availability and stuff. And even Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles called him out a little bit on it this summer and said, yeah, he could lose his starting job. And then they wrote in week one, rotating with Ryan Bates before Ryan Bates got hurt. It felt like they were trying to move Ryan Bates into the starting lineup there as he was coming back to health. But to me, I don't think you can circle any of the issues they've shown in the first 2 weeks and go, oh, well, Nate Davis is the problem or Coleman Shelton is the problem. It seems like you said, Darnell Hunter struggled against Daniil Wright. Coleman Shelton seems to really, I think he's a better run blocker than pass blocker. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but his anchor hasn't been where it needs to be. Tevin Jenkins has really struggled in pass protection. So I'm looking at this and it feels like it's a kind of a full system issue right now. So is that, do you think, just players not executing, or is that potentially scheme or coaching from Chris Morgan and Shane Waldron?
Probably a little bit of both, honestly. And I mean, all the things that you just outlined, I mean, this has been who these players have been their whole career. Tevin Jenkins has struggled in pass protection his whole career. He's a really good run blocker. That's who he is until this point, as of today in his NFL career. Coleman Shelton just isn't very big or strong. He's going to struggle to hold his position against power and generate a lot of movement solo by himself. He's, a decent complementary kind of run blocker zone primarily as well. I mean, he's okay. He's replaceable. That's just kind of been what he's been, so far. I mean, Braxton Jones is, kind of is what he is as well. I mean, I don't know how much better he's going to get at this point necessarily. Again, a better run blocker than pass blocker, in my opinion. Has some technical things in pass protection and also just physical, I think, limitations that I'm not too sure how much those are going to get better. Nate Davis, his time in Tennessee, man, I mean, he was, if that was who you were getting now, he'd be the second best offensive lineman on the team. But I'm afraid that at this point, I'm not seeing the same level of anchor and power that we saw from him in Tennessee, maybe due to accumulation of injuries. I'm not sure the details there, if he's going to gradually kind of work back into a solid starter or not. But I mean, he has to stay on the field, or else everything's a moot point with him. So we'll see. I guess, I mean, based on who these players were coming in, what the expectations were, who they've played so far, I don't know. I don't know if anything is too alarming or like surprising necessarily. I just, I mean, if you're a below average offensive line and you're going against the, an elite pass rusher, Will Anderson, and just this uber aggressive defensive front like the Texans have. And I mean, there's a really good chance if you play that game 10 times with this caliber of offensive line, it's probably not going to go well, 8 at a times. I mean, it's just, so I don't know. That's just kind of how I see it.
All right. Well, and let me wind back to the Titans game a little bit as well, because I think Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright had good games against Tennessee. I think they did a good job there against those edges, but the interior struggled again. And Jeffrey Simmons is going to make everybody struggle. We know what a force he can be inside. I'm just curious to get your opinion on Tavondre Sweat coming in. I mean, he is a mountain of a man and really impressed, and he had some good film at Texas. I'm not sitting there saying that was out of nowhere. I was surprised he came in and made that much of an impact right out of the gate. So what did you think about the Titans? Was that more of potentially the best, one of the best, if not the best defensive tackle duo in the league? Just, again, hurting a below average unit.
Yeah, I don't think it's the best defensive tackle duo in the league. That's for sure. I mean, teams like Washington, and others, I think are better. I mean, Jeffrey Simmons is, one of the 10 best 3 techniques in the league. So yeah, I mean, everybody's going to struggle to some degree for the most part with him. I think Tavondre Sweat just caught Jenkins off guard. I mean, I think he may have been, and, I'm not saying this is the correct approach, but he may have been expecting more of kind of a guy who's just going to hold the point, not move a whole lot. But that's the reason why he was a second round pick, and still drafted that high with the weight concerns and maybe some work ethic concerns and all the sort of things that he had coming out of Texas. The reason why he still was drafted so high is because he can move, at 360 plus pounds. And he set up Jenkins, a few times in that game and crossed his face and made him look, kind of, stuck, his feet stuck in cement a couple of times. He whiffed with his hands. I mean, I don't know. I just feel like that was kind of a bad approach for Jenkins there. But again, it just plays into his weaknesses that he's always had in terms of pass protection. Strike timing, hand placement has always been an issue for him. Footwork and pass protection. That's why he got moved from tackle to guard, I think, to a large degree, and it still hasn't improved inside either. So, trust me, I mean, it kind of pains me. I love Jenkins coming out. I was very high on him because of his size, power, and demeanor. And I thought he could really lean his, kind of hang his hat on that, and while the pass protection incrementally got, to a serviceable level, but that part hasn't happened yet. So a guy like Sweat has enough talent to make him pay for it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I thought Jenkins' pass protection was improving last year. I don't know if you
Moderately.
disagree.
I mean,
You thought
yeah,
it was
but not enough
moderately?
to where I was going in thinking, oh, okay, you got a rock solid guard now or anything like that. But I mean, yeah, there were some improvements, since he moved into guard, I would say overall. But um, obviously, it's maybe not to where we maybe thought that it quite was yet. So
Gotcha. Yeah, because he's very popular amongst the fan base, and of course, due for a
because of his
contract.
strengths, yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
right,
he's fun in the run game. I mean, they
exactly,
nickname him Professor Pancake. He gets out there and moves people.
yep,
It's fun to watch. But
for sure.
let me ask you about stunts, because that seems to be one thing, and I don't even think it's exclusive for this year. I mean, obviously, stunts are there to get an offensive, catch an offensive line and get into the backfield. But it does, for me, it feels like the Bears struggle to pick those up more often than not. And that's has really seemed to be a miss multiple times here in the first two games. When a unit like that is struggling on stunts, do you think is that a communication issue? Is that players not staying, and making sure they're looking at the right gaps? Is it a coaching issue? What do you think for a team that needs to improve picking up stunts? What can they do here better moving forward?
I think just play more football together, honestly. I mean, first year center in this system on this team, that is part of it. The right guard, hasn't been able to practice as much as you would like. So, that in of itself, you don't have familiarity with the guys next to you. You don't have any cohesion. You don't have any, equity between yourselves in terms of trust. You don't have that, so you kind of went into the season rolling the dice in a sense, and you ran into a buzzsaw with the Texans and D'Amico Ryans, and I mean he's been giving teams trouble with stunts for 5 years or whatever. So it's not a surprise they struggled there as much as they did. But just overall, I mean, I would say playing football together for an extended period of time is first and foremost how you're going to improve on communication. That's the only way it happens. And then, you can only improve to a certain degree, I would say, with a center who can't anchor, consistently. That's going to be an issue. So, I would say those in terms of if you want to isolate the trio inside, in terms of communication being an issue, which it is. And also, that also bleeds into the tackles, because if you have a TE or an ET stunt, obviously the guards and the tackle have to work together, and they, at least on the right side, don't have any, familiarity with each other either. So, I mean, there's a lot of things here in terms of communication wise, processing, seeing through the same sets of eyes, which is critical for offensive line. That's something Nolan Krutz, taught me a long time ago. Just being an invaluable thing for offensive line. That's the goal, is trying to see through the same set of eyes as an offensive line. 5 is 1. That's the whole idea of playing offensive line. But if you don't practice together and you got new guys, well, I mean, there's no opportunity to do that. And it's very difficult to do that now when bullets are flying and it isn't practice and, things like that. I think, the one kind of saving grace right here is over the next 3 weeks, this is going to be the time where, you're going to have to try to get some of this improved a little bit, because After that, as teams get more film, as the competition ramps up, you're going to see Washington. I mean, that interior duo is nasty with Deron Payne and John Allen. You're going to see New England and Green Bay and all these teams later. I mean, then it'll be, obviously way too late. So I really think these next 3 weeks there's an opportunity there. We'll see if they can get it. I mean, and this is also going to go into the coaching aspect as well. How quickly can you help these guys get to that point as well? It's not just, it's kind of give and take.
Yeah, and like you said, these teams they struggle against the run. The Colts have given up more yards than anybody, and the Rams and Panthers are right behind them. Those are literally their next three opponents. So if they can't get the run game healthy against these three, then yeah, I certainly think the alarms will be going off everywhere.
Rightfully so.
But let me ask you about the run game. A couple more for Brandon Thorn here before we let him go. The run game. You look at this and, the Bears running backs as a team are averaging 2.5 yards a carry through 2 games. Basically, the only yardage they're getting is from the quarterback, which is what they don't have Justin Fields back there. I know Caleb's athletic, but you'd like to see a little more established in the running game. And again, what my eyes are seeing a lot when I'm going back and watching these games is some tentative play by the offensive line trying to get out of the second level, maybe some confusion. It doesn't even seem like they're necessarily targeting who I would think would be the right guys. I'm curious about this run scheme, what you've seen from it, how the Bears have blocked it, and if there's any issues, because as much as Bears fans were frustrated with Luke Getsy's offense the last couple of seasons, this team, not just Justin Fields, this team knew how to run the football.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's honestly, I think to a large degree what you mentioned, which I think is a really good point in terms of not being able to maybe properly ID, where you're going, and then the timing of how to get there based on all this multiplicity of fronts that they're seeing, especially, just over the last 2 weeks from the defenses, when the picture changes right before the snap and you don't have that communication and that comfort with each other to communicate non-verbally and to communicate very quickly and efficiently. And those sorts of things are changing in front of you. I mean, that's kind of a recipe for disaster. And I think when you watch their run game, I think that's largely the issue here is just not being sure of feel on double teams, I would say, in terms of when do I overtake this totally? When is this guy going to release? When should I release? How to kind of sync up, properly and work those combos, work those doubles. And if you can't do that, you're going to allow penetration. You're going to allow guys to split that double team. You're going to allow space to be created between those. And it's just going to ruin rush lanes and, just kind of hamper the whole operation. And I think largely that's what's going on here because, individually, these are good run blockers, for the most part. They're all better run blockers and pass blockers. They're all big and strong, minus the center. And the center is a capable zone run blocker. So, that's really the main explanation that I could say here based on studying these guys for, pretty much the whole career and knowing what their strengths are, which is as run blockers, moving people. But the run game, especially on zone runs, so much of that isn't necessarily me versus you as a man, like one-on-one. It's more so how can I work with the guy next to me to, and utilize footwork and timing to sync up and be on the same track as the runner and to be all unified. And that's kind of, that is not necessarily maybe their strengths, and it's going to take time and, time on task really, to get there, I think. And I know people may not want to hear that, but that's kind of is what it is, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And last one I want to ask you, I want to switch back to pass protection because I do want to ask you in essence about Caleb Williams here, because what we've seen from this Bears offense that, as Bears fans have not seen from Justin Fields, really did not see from Mitch Trubisky, is Caleb Williams really seemingly having full control of the offense at the line of scrimmage, moving people around, changing things up, calling protections, things like that we did not see the previous quarterbacks doing nearly as much as they were kind of getting worked into these offenses. But the Bears really seem to have given him the keys. Now, Tevin Jenkins made a comment after this Texans game that was a little dismissive about the line struggle, basically saying, hey, we're blocking where we're supposed to block kind of thing. which made you wonder if he was kind of getting at scheme or maybe getting at protections being called potentially by the rookie quarterback. So I'm just curious, and I know it's complex when you're not in the huddles, when you're not in the film rooms and in the meeting rooms. It's tough to kind of decipher exactly what's going on, but with a rookie quarterback, there are things he's doing potentially making the line look worse, or is this just, D'Amico Ryans was just calling up pressure and they really just weren't responding to it?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me without really trying to study it and ask people, in terms of the protections, what's being called, paying attention to the quarterback on each and every snap to see if there's audibling going on, and things like that. I mean, and what Tevin said there, I would imagine is, I mean, I guess you could say they've been relatively, somewhat, assignment sound, but they're just getting beat. So regardless of, him saying, we're blocking who we're supposed to, maybe he's speaking just from an assignment perspective. However, I mean, if guys are just getting beat, then, that I don't know. It's tough to defend the play of the line because the one-on-one aspect of pass protection for them has not been good, regardless of if they're going to the right man. So I think that's the biggest issue is guys are just, unless we're talking about stunts, which is more so a, communication, working together, all that sort of stuff, processing. But there's a lot of one-on-one losses here as well. But again, that's not super surprising considering who these guys have been throughout their career and all that. So, but to me, like Caleb hasn't made this exponentially worse like Justin Fields did, when he was there, which, is that combination of the line struggle and pass protection and his struggling in the pocket was kind of a nightmare combo. I think Caleb is much better in the pocket. Now, nobody's perfect. I mean, I'm not saying he's Tom Brady in the pocket, but he's certainly, getting the ball out quick when he can. Yeah. He's evading pressure when he can. I mean, I think he's doing, based on from the snap on, to me, he's doing a good job. Now, pre-snap, I can't go into all the details there necessarily like I would like to, but post-snap, he looks like, he's doing a pretty good job to me.
All right. Yeah, absolutely. So as we wrap this up with Brandon Thorn. So Brandon, just a quick summary. You're basically saying too early to panic. These next three opponents, things should look better just based on a lesser opponent in front of this offensive line. But if the Bears are heading to London after these three games to play Jacksonville and the line hasn't improved, that's where everyone should be hitting the panic button.
Yeah, and also I would kind of temper those expectations for the improvement as well. I'm not necessarily saying this is going to be a top half of the league unit over these next three games. I mean, that would be very surprising too. I'm expecting more of just, functional. Like you're still going to, competent. You're still going to lose. I mean, if these tackles or if these guards get isolated too many times in true drop back situations and they get down and they're playing from behind, God forbid that happens against these next three opponents, but say it does. I mean, yeah, they're going to lose reps and it's probably not going to be pretty, but I would definitely say competency is something that, people should probably expect over the next three games. And then, yeah, if that doesn't happen, then, I'd be pretty worried.
All right. Well, there he is. Brandon at Brandon Thorn NFL on Twitter/X. And again, you got the Trench Warfare newsletter. You can subscribe to that and make sure you check out his video work with Andrew Whitworth. And again, his feed is nonstop offensive line, defensive line videos. It's great footage. If you want to see Javon Dexter get worked by Laramie Tunsley, you can see that too. That was a rough one. But Brandon, thank you for a great interview. It really brought some insight to what's going on with this Bears offensive line. Thanks so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm happy to do it and love talking lines. So yeah, thanks again for having me.